Hello, my name is Mariah Yori, and I'm going to be talking to you today about ruminal tympany, otherwise known as bloat. And I just want to make a note that this picture on the right here, this is one of my goats, and I will say she was not bloated in this picture. She was actually just very pregnant, but I thought it was a pretty good illustration of a distended belly. But anyways, so what is bloat and why do we care? Now, if you are familiar with livestock, you are, particularly ruminant livestock, you are probably familiar with bloat. However, the knowledge of it is very variable between livestock owners, and that is why I want to talk to you about it today, because in the goat sector in particular, I see a lot of people who don't quite understand what bloat is, or that there's different types, and therefore different ways to prevent it, or really how to even tell between a bloated animal and non-bloated animal. And so that's where I'm coming to you from today. But I do want to note that everything that I talk about can be applied to all ruminants, cattle, sheep, goats. And honestly, from all the research I saw, it actually affects cattle and sheep more than it affects goats, but it is still a problem in all ruminants. And a lot of times when people see it, it's really just because they suddenly see sudden death in their animals, in one or several, depending on how many they have and what's causing the problem. And in a research survey by Wang in 2023, he actually said that this accounted for 2 to 3% of ruminant deaths, which doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you think about the millions of ruminants that we have, that really adds up quickly. So, what is it? So, you got a picture here, and you have your ruminant animal. This is a goat. It can be applied, like I said, to any of them, but this is a goat. You got your esophagus leads down into your four-chambered rumen. Looking at it from the left side, you're going to have the rumen here and the reticulum in the front. Back here, you'll see part of the abomasum. The omasum would be on the right side, so we cannot see that. But bloat occurs in the rumen itself, and so that's what we're going to be looking at. So in your rumen, you have three different layers, essentially. You've got this liquid layer on the bottom. It is composed of broken down feed stuff, a lot of saliva, and uncountable numbers of microbiota. That includes bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and that's what composes this liquid layer. On top of the liquid layer, you have this fiber mat. That is the material that is newer, all the grasses and hays that are not yet broken down. This is the stuff that will be regurgitated, chewed, and swallowed again. And then at the top here, you have this gas pocket, which consists mostly of CO2 and CH4, that is carbon dioxide and methane, and then a very small amount, I think about 1% from the research I saw, of oxygen. And generally, ruminants are going to rid themselves of those gases by belching them out, eructating as it is called, and those will be sent out of the mouth and essentially will not cause a problem for the goat. However, so we have two types of bloat. The first one is frothy bloat, otherwise known as primary bloat. It is generally caused by highly digestible feeds or high protein feeds, which are usually the highly digestible ones. This includes things like legumes mostly, particular alfalfa and clover legumes. Some legumes do not cause this problem as bad as others. You can see frothy bloat with high digestible concentrate diets, though, like in feedlots. And so you might hear somebody call it feedlot bloat. It is essentially the same thing. But this is where these highly digestible feeds, they're creating a lot of protein and a lot of very fine particles that are being broken down. And because of that, because of this very fast breaking down process of the gases, of the fine particles, and just protein in general, as Dr. Seegers mentioned in one of our lectures recently, that all that protein creates this more viscous fluid, you're going to end up with this stable foam layer because these tiny little air bubbles, instead of floating to the top and coalescing as they normally would to then be eructated, they are just staying in this foam, like if you think about dish foam sitting on top of your dishwater, it's just all these tiny trapped air bubbles, and so they can't come out. And they will actually also put pressure onto the cardia region here at the entrance of the esophagus to the rumen. And that pressure, that nerve there, will keep it closed and will also stop it from coming out. And so you've just got this trapped foam with all these trapped air bubbles. And so now you've got all this pressure expanding in there, all this air expanding and unable to escape. So our second type of bloat is free gas bloat, also called secondary because it is a secondary reaction to something else happening. That means the causes things like obstruction, getting something stuck in the esophagus, rumen immobility, like a vagal nerve injury that will stop the rumen walls from moving and pushing that air out, or acidosis, which we've talked about in class, which will slow down rumen motility and therefore stop air from being expelled as well, or recumbency. If a ruminant animal lies on their side or upside down for too long, that will also stop things from coming out. As I was talking before about the cardia, that recumbent position will often put pressure on the cardia, which will keep the esophagus closed and keep air from coming out. The symptoms for both, though, are very similar, so sometimes it can be very hard to tell which kind you are dealing with. The main symptom you're going to see for both is distension of the paralumbar fossa.
All right, so I just wanted to give you all a real-world example real quick of what it is you're actually looking for in a bloated goat. This is my girl Strawberry. She is a very dairy goat. She has this wide rumen. That means she's healthy. A lot of people, when they see her, they think she's fat. A lot of people, when they see this in their own goats, they think they're bloated. But how you can really tell the difference between a healthy rumen or even a fat rumen and a bloated goat is you're going to look here at the paralumbar fossa. And this is a triangle created right here. It's created by looking at the last rib, by looking at the line of the obliques, and then looking at the transverse processes of the spine. And that's what creates this triangle. And this is what's going to become distended when they are bloated. And it's going to become very round and very airy.
So as we talked about this paralumbar fossa, you will see here there's 3 different degrees of it. You have mild, where very little bit starts to bloat on the left side, moderate, where that left side is very round now, and you're actually starting to see some of that pressure being put on the right side, and then severe, where you've got almost this beach ball shape. That animal is going to be very uncomfortable, very tight, and you're really going to want to get something done about it. Other symptoms you're going to see are, like I said, pain and discomfort, lack of appetite, lethargy, stiff gait, difficulty breathing, and death. And you get those later symptoms because as that rumen expands, it starts to put pressure on the other organs. And in pathology reports after an animal's died from that, you will see what's called a bloat line. And that's what we have in this bottom picture here. This is an esophagus. This up here would be on the left-hand side would be where the head is. Down on the right would be towards the rumen. And so you get this bloat line where pressure has been put and the blood vessels up here have been hemorrhaged, whereas these down here don't have blood in them at all. They're very pale and constricted because of that pressure that's been put on them, but pressure going to be put on the lungs, on the diaphragm, on the liver, and obviously that's going to hemorrhage or constrict different organs of the body depending on where the pressure is being placed on them. And so obviously it's not a great thing when we see it. You do want to take it seriously. You want to take care of it right then. Different treatments for this are walking and massaging of the rumen. This is only for mild cases. I in particular have a goat that gets chronic bloat, but it's always mild, and usually walking and massaging will take care of that because that helps that gas to coalesce and then get belched out through that movement. Tubing is another thing. That is the most common thing that a producer can do for moderate to severe. You do want to make sure though that you have that tube in the rumen and not the lungs. If you insert the tube and you hear a crackling noise, you're in the lungs. You're going to want to make sure you take that out and get it down into the stomach. You will be able to smell if you're in the stomach. And if gas starts to come out, that means you have free gas bloat, and that should take care of your problem. Whereas if it does not come out, if you know you're in the stomach and gas is not coming out, you are probably experiencing frothy bloat and you will need to drench with anti-foamy agents. If you are dealing with free gas bloat and is severe and tubing does not work or you have an obstruction, you may have to do surgical removal of the object that is preventing the gas from escaping. Or in the most severe cases, you may have to place a trocar, as you can see up here in this right-hand picture, or placing a cannula, which both essentially do the same thing, creating an external passage from the rumen for that gas to escape. But really, prevention is your best bet in dealing with bloat. And if you remember the causes, that is your key to avoiding it. So when you are feeding those high protein, high digestible diets, those legumes, those high concentrate diets, feed them in small controlled amounts. When you are feeding those diets, don't make sudden feed changes to them. Or if you're going from one high digestible food to another, make that a slow feed change as well. You can include ionophores and buffers in those diets. The ionophores will help to make those diets more efficient when they are broken down, and the buffers will help to maintain the pH of the rumen, and both of those will help to prevent acidosis that would create that free gas bloat. You can limit grazing on lush, immature forages, particular legumes like alfalfa and clover. And you can just help your animals avoid ingestion of foreign objects that would create those blockages for free gas bloat, like I saw in an article by Lim in 2023 that talked about the increase of free gas bloat after COVID because of the increased incidences of face masks being eaten by animals and causing blockages. So, watch what your animals are eating and try not to let them eat any masks. These are my references, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.